that helpful. I noticed when I looked at it again that there was 12 minutes in it just of me typing. And I didn't realize how long it took me to type stuff. So what I want to show you about how to work on the paper is right here, beginning with assignments for our first critical response paper. To write the paper efficiently and get your quick start, the first suggestion is to look over the authors that we have read in the past few days, searching for great quotes that indicate how important African American studies knowledge is. Um, you can borrow these quotes from other people's posts on Blackboard, from the sways, or from the mini lectures or lecture notes, or whatever source you want to use. Just make sure if you pull something out of a mini lecture or lecture notes, you give me credit, for pointing that out to you. Or if you take it out of the discussion board, give your classmate credit for inspiring you by putting their last name and the date of their discussion post. And ideally, I want you to use someone before 1900 and after 1900. So I do that in this example. The goal is that you use history because history is so important to African American studies. If you use two people that are, within the 1800s or something like that, it's fine. But I just don't want you to compare Kendrick Lamar with Ta-Nehisi Coates. I want you to challenge yourself to look at James Baldwin, John Merritt, Harriet Jacobs, and some of those historical figures. Or you can use Sylvia Frey or Eddie Glaude to talk about history. I just want to make connections between past and present day. So there are many ways you can do that. Now, I have decided that I want to look at James Baldwin's letter because James Baldwin is one of my favorite writers, particularly when it comes to writing and essays. So here's his 50-year-old letter to his nephew. And if you use this particular link instead of a PDF download, you can cut and paste from it. So I'm going to select a quote from Baldwin. And first I chose 3, and then I decided which one I wanted the most. I started thinking that it is not permissible that the crimes of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. I started to think I should use that one, but then I felt like it was a little bit too vague. And although this letter is about a crime and people who he ironically calls innocent, who are the ones that perpetrate the crime, the innocent and well-meaning people, the Americans who don't believe that they are complicit in the poverty and destruction of Black communities through racism. There's also it's about that, but it's also about the love within the Black family. Here you were to be loved, baby, hard at once and forever to strengthen you against the loveless world. But the idea of love comes up frequently. First of all, Baldwin talks about love. When he looks into his nephew's father's face, when he looks into his brother's face, he sees him laugh. He sees how much he loves him. So keep in mind that although we have pain, a lot of human pain and oppression, and all of the sources we've read, there's also there's intense love, such as Harriet Jacobs describes as well. So thinking about this concept of like, yikes, there is oppression. There are these people who are oblivious to doing something terrible, but there is so much love. That made me think of John Merritt's sermon. Now, in full disclosure, I will tell you that I've published a couple of articles in academic journals. Possibly I've published something in a book about John Merritt. I don't remember exactly. So yes, I'm an expert on John Merritt, so this is kind of unfair. And I'm using a kind of weird source that I don't expect all of you to use, but I just love it so much. Those God-provoking wretches, as I mentioned in the mini lecture, who despise their fellow man, who deprive, who don't believe that they're of the same species, who deprive them of God's bountiful goodness that we are supposed to improve and enjoy. The word improve in the context of the 1700s means that you need land to improve. It means you build a culture, you build a civilization. It's about the value of your body and your work to create a new nation. Again, that comes from my expertise, and I don't expect you to know all that stuff. But there are things that are really accessible here in the Merritt lecture, such as the fact that he says, who are these despicable wretches? Who are these monsters? Surely God didn't say, they never came out of the hand of God in such a forlorn condition. And then he just has this big space, and he probably stops and does a really dramatic pause. And then he says, which brings me to consider the fall of man. Okay, so racism is kind of the fall of man in this sermon, and his black audience is totally going to get that in the 1700s because racism is actively invented during the 1700s by pseudoscientists, by Thomas Jefferson's supposed scientific work, claiming that blacks are a different species than whites. So there's a historical context again there that comes from my expertise, but you can borrow that idea if indeed you're inspired by Merritt. So next thing that I did, in the first iteration of this, I spent 20 minutes writing about the letter to my nephew and Merritt's sermon. And then I realized, oh geez, I've got a 22-minute video and it's mostly me telling my children they can't have ice cream for breakfast. This is super annoying. So I accidentally deleted this, but I had it on video. So I went back and looked at it, and you can kind of see the words coming out as we go along, and borrowed some of the ideas, but revised it into the new draft. And the first thing that I did in either case was I picked my quotes. Here's the quote from Merritt. Here's the quote I ultimately landed on from Baldwin, very close to that first one, but also more about the solution to the problem rather than the problem. In both cases, the problem is racism, the solution is love. And then I introduced the context of both pieces and compare them. And hey, they're both about poverty and oppression and brotherly love. Then I go about explaining by using quotes mostly from my two 1-inch indented epigraphs, but also dropping a few quotes here and there from other parts of each text to explain my argument that these two texts do something very similar because they both talk about racism and its economic consequences, and they both talk about brotherly love. So I ended up, holy, with 1,000 words, including the epigraphs. You don't need quite that much, but if you read through this sample paper, you can see that I explain everything as thoroughly as possible because I'm thinking about explaining it to everybody in this class. So when you write, don't think you're writing to me to explain things to me. You're explaining to everybody in the class. And like, imagine if I wrote something to explain it to myself. That'd be ridiculous. Anyway, using these key terms, the innocents from Baldwin and the wretches or the monsters from Merritt, and also coming back to how brotherly love can solve the problem that the innocents and the wretches create in the world. What does that have to do with race? And then my concluding paragraph, like, who the hell cares? Why does that matter? Why should you know about any of this? I bring that all home, I hope, in the concluding paragraph. So this is 2 pages, and I picked a pretty font that I like. And then the title. God-provoking is how Merritt describes the wretches, meaning they piss God off. They're sinners. And Baldwin uses the term innocence sarcastically. So I just patched those two things together and made my title God-provoking innocence. I added the Merritt text. I'll add this as well in the folder about paper writing. Actually, I added Merit in the Harriet Jacobs folder. Today I will also hide all of the quizzes at some point and post the first test. Means that they can't take the quizzes anymore because now they have to take the test and the quizzes are supposed to be done. You know what a quiz is?
It's when you have to take a quiz
to show what?
To show your good art.
To show your good art, exactly. The art of the mind and the creation of ideas and new knowledge. So I will. You'll get a notification later today when that exam gets posted. And if you missed any of the quizzes, just go look the stuff up because you have a long time to finish the exam. I usually give a week. In Maymester, that's kind of asking for trouble, but do it when you can and do the best you can. If you've saved all of the quizzes, and you still might have a minute or so to go save the answers to all the quizzes, then you learn the stuff faster. So once again, tell me if you have questions, and I am going to end this. Have a great weekend. Ask me if you have questions.